When the devil came, he was not red. He was chrome, 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 and he said, come with me. Come, come, come with me. You must go.
Welcome to the Hell is Chrome podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Dyer, bringing you another installment from the longest running supporter group podcast in San Diego, if not the world. Probably not the world, but here we are nonetheless. A lot to get to today, coming off by all accounts, very successful event in Chula Vista with SDFC. If you recall, that is the football club that we support, the San Diego Football Club. So, to help this debrief and get into all the news of the week, everything you need to know, producer John Cross is with me. John, how are you, sir?
How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm good.
I'm doing.
Oh, I asked you first. So,
All
how
right.
are you?
I am doing quite well. I actually just, luckily for me, the Rocket League stream finished up just a couple minutes before we were going on air. So we got to see our locals sweep Steel Army. I think they were playing tonight. But since we last had a podcast, they've had 2 games in the knockout rounds and won a real tight one against El Matador last week, which was quite the match if you didn't get a chance to see it. And then this match tonight where they swept. So they're cruising along right now. I don't know. Do you have any idea when the next game is?
No, they kind of schedule them on the fly, so we'll know. They'll kind of do a doodle poll or whatever and figure out everybody's availability for the next match, and we'll know like next week when they're gonna play. It's always a little helter skelter, just the nature of esports. These folks, while they are very good, they're not getting paid to do this. So a lot of people have other commitments, jobs that really tend to interfere with the supporter lifestyle. I gotta say, all of these
Isn't that how it always works?
other things in life just getting in the way of doing the thing that we all enjoy, and of course that is standing and yelling for 90 minutes at a time, everything that comes with it. Yeah, it's a pretty good week. I think there's a lot of things to kind of digest coming out of Saturday. Of course, was the big Chrome Ball event in Chula Vista that we've been talking about for the last month or two. All 7 supporters groups had a presence at the event. There were drums, there were chants, there were songs. There was almost a couple fights in the street soccer tournament, which to me makes it all the more fun. I got to see some kids almost get into a scrape. They're just being so competitive. Some hard fouls on the asphalt. Really fun and competitive environment there. So just cool. There were the luchadors wrestling the big concert when the sun went down. So yeah, it was a lot going on. Chances for a lot of folks to kind of, I think this was the largest gathering of supporters yet. And, maybe some informal sidebars and conversations were had to kind of help move things along on this process we're having. John, I think I missed you. You were there before I showed up. How was it on your end?
Yeah, I was there early. I was there for setup until about 1. So probably around the time that it was really starting to kick off. But it was great. I had a great time. It was nice being with everyone. As you said, it was a huge event. And there were starting to be tons of people around 1, so I can't imagine what it was like the rest of the afternoon and once all the other events started going. So I'd love to hear your take. It was pretty calm for the most part. But we again had there were some good conversations and lots of people. I know I had heard from some of the other leadership that we signed up quite a few new members on Saturday, which was great. A lot of people got to pick up their merch and get their scarves and scarf chains. I know I was able to get mine, so that was nice. And it was, I don't know, it was a great event. I think it, to me, and I think I posted this somewhere in one of our leadership channels, that this was kind of a turning point to me that I saw compared to the other Chrome Ball Tour events, which were more around the soccer and you had people who were interested. I think this was an event where, as a club, SDFC is turning the corner a little bit, where people are starting to become a little more aware of their presence in the community. There is more talk around players that are going to be signed, and rumors of players and coaches, and now it's slowly starting to feel like it's becoming real. And that was one of our complaints, right, that we've had most of this winter into the spring, is it's just there's not really a team yet. Duran was the signing, and then we got a couple more signings, but now it feels like we're on the cusp of a lot more news and information, and probably a very crazy summer, with the Copa America and the Euros and everything coming up. And I can't imagine that SDFC will not be trying to be involved and do things all summer long. So I think this was a big turning point of raising awareness and interest.
Sure. And, that kind of relationship with the club, with Loyal, we had things where like we knew the people in the gift shop and we knew the people in the office and you could go there or whatever. I've already got going down that path because I had like the best experience in the merch tent. Now, I will say SDFC merch still too expensive, way too expensive. $48 for a t-shirt. It's too much. It's too much. But beyond that part of it, and if you know somebody that works for the club, they get like a 40% discount. So there's, of course, I forgot that before going myself, but I got a screen printed shirt with the one of the Chula Vista art pieces on it. I was helped by a guy named Christian in the merch tent. He told me that it was hot and sunny. He told me he'd been in the sun all day. He was only supposed to press like one shirt like hours earlier, but when he did the one, like people just kept coming up and asking him to do it. So he did it. He stood there and made shirts and hoodies, whatever was getting screen pressed for folks there in the hot sun, doing it for the love of the game. And that was super appreciated. So I hope the club knows. Hope the club is taking care of its merch people, because hey, they are your kind of your face to the public, right? Like this is where people are interacting with your club a lot of the time. I know people like us, we tend to talk to office people and things that kind of just come with supporter stuff. But for your average fan, their main interaction is going to be with their ticket rep that calls them on the phone, and it's going to be with the merch folks. And so,
Right.
Yeah, great job, Christian. Super appreciate it. Hope they give you a big old raise. Not my call, but hey, you're selling $48 shirts. I think you can kick a little over to my boy Christian. He did a great job.
Was there anything that stood out to you while you were there? Because, like I said, it was just starting to kick off when I left. You could really feel the energy and the excitement, and more people around there. And I know Paul Topier he had showed up right as I was leaving, so we just basically exchanged a quick hello and goodbye, and then I was gone. And I know there was a new shift coming in, several shifts for the rest of the day. But what stood out to you? Because the soccer had just started, when I was there, so it was just some of the early games. The wrestling hadn't started, but I got to walk, when there was no one there kind of early, there's setup, just kind of walk and check out the whole thing. But I didn't really get to see any of the other stuff in action. So what stood out to you?
I mean, just the number of people I saw coming through, the number of people who came up to the booth and asked about either what we're about or said that they missed us from the loyal matches and that they're glad to see us and that we're still trekking along. Um, you know, people that I know from like my my real life. I say my real life, but saw a few familiar faces. Got to connect with some other like kind of media type people and talk about everything. Um, for me, I've been really fixated on the kind of union alliance aspect of things and how we are going to come together and make the entire section with its 2,000 plus seats. And you'll be standing, the seats will be locked, but how we make that look and sound as cohesive as we were able to do in that small section 109 before, which I think
Right.
is kind of what we all want. We all want it to be this unified voice, 2,000 singing as one, supporting
3,000.
3,000. You see, math, but as one, supporting the players on the field, and you know, events like this, I think, are going to help us get there. Um, there is still some, just I think right now a lot of the groups are kind of hyper focused on what they are doing as groups. We as locals, we are hyper focused on what we are doing as locals, right? And everybody else is kind of along the same path, right? Like running and managing and growing and promoting a supporter group, it's a lot of work, right? And at the same time, we're asking all of these folks to also form another kind of entity and governing structure and come together and work with, six other groups with maybe divergent interests and things like that. Um, I think, groups like the locals and Chavos who have already kind of established, whatever we are with our rules and the paperwork involved, like we've got a little bit of an advantage, right? Like we've got a little bit more brain space to manage that part of it. But some of these other groups just started. They are just now going through the organizational phase of their own supporter group, and they're being asked to at the same time form another group, that will incorporate everybody. And you know, it's a lot and it's a big ask, and you can still kind of see, where we need a little bit more work and a little more communication. I think, just I don't know because I wasn't there for the whole time, but there's not that cohesion that, I personally I would like to see us all getting together and doing a song or doing a chant and all of us drumming together versus individual groups you know not getting involved in the other group's song or drums. And I yeah, I get it, and we need to do more drum practices and we need to get all of that stuff, learn each other's stuff. But I want to get there, and we're just not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but I think we are well on the path to get there. And again, as someone who's been involved in a lot of these conversations, I think really when you look at it, we are 95% on the same page. We all want that experience. We want to be there. And part of these, some of the things that like that you brought up here are a little bit of growing pains, just learning how to work together, right? Because that's what we have to do in order to create this new entity that's really going to kind of manage the match day experience in the supporter section. Which, I mean, I have to say, again, the people that I'm working with and dealing with from the other supporter groups, they have great attitudes. They want to move in that direction as well, to create this space so that we are standing shoulder to shoulder and singing with one voice. But there's going to be bumps and hiccups along the way. There just is. There's no way it's going to be a perfect, easy solution, and there's going to be some tough conversations
But
coming up
why
that
not, John?
we'll have to
Why
have.
can't it be easy?
Well, it would be nice. I think sometimes, um, and I don't mean this in any particular, individual way, but I think history and sometimes egos and ideas and personalities can get in the way sometimes. Um, but we really haven't seen too much of that. But sometimes someone will speak off the cuff and maybe not realize what they're saying or how that might be interpreted or affected by another group. So there's a lot of communication issues to work through,
Sure.
which we are, and we're making significant strides in progress. But it's, again, you're going to have some hiccups, and you work it out as you go. I mean, everybody's committed to working it out. So it's not like there's been any kind of problem that halts the whole process. It's, there may be a hiccup here or there, and you talk it out and you work it out and you figure out a better plan moving forward so that we don't run into those same issues again.
Yeah, and I think the through the meetings with the club and the conversations on the alliance side of things, like certain members of the leadership of groups have already met and intermingled and kind of know each other by name and by sight. And I think probably there's 8, 9, 10 members of our group that have rotated through these meetings. But like with the signups, we are now over 200 members, proudly. And
Right.
They have not had the opportunities to get to know the people that they'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with, quite yet, from the other groups. So that's what I was hoping to see, Saturday. And we did see. I think that we kind of, human nature, you gravitate to, the folks you're familiar with. So, Logos and Chavos were like right there together, intermingled, which, makes sense. But it was cool. And our booth was right next to Dago Boys. So it was a lot of fun. Whenever they would do like one of their songs or chants or whatever, I just go over and start hitting my drum along with them. And then being next to Chavos when they did one of theirs, like I just hit my drum along with them. And it made things work out nicely for me personally, because I could feel like I was part of both groups, which,
Right.
is, what I really enjoy is bringing that unity, that unifying kind of presence. I think as we have more of these events, people get more opportunities to come out and interact with the other supporter groups. Then that cohesion will happen, right? Like it's not a top down thing, right? Like the
Right.
the leaders can all be best friends, knights of the round table, and all that, but until like the people that are going to make up that critical mass of the section all get those chances to be around each other and do this stuff together, it's going to be, it's got to come from them, right? Like it's got to come from everybody that's the rank and file, so to speak. So and I think this is phase one, step one, this big event. I would imagine these other Chrome Ball events to come. I don't know what's planned, so I'm not, speaking with any type of knowledge as usual. But I would imagine there are similar scale. I would hope that there are other large scale things like this to come, because as we hit the other parts of the county, other parts of town, we're going to be bringing in more of those folks that really need to spend that time together.
Right. And I think, your comment about Knights of the Round Table reminds me, and something we've talked about before, that, you know, the Knights of the Round Table have a name and identity, so it kind of identifies that group. I think once we get that name and identity, because otherwise, if you don't call them Knights of the Round Table, they're just a bunch of knights, and that's kind of where we are right now. We're just a bunch of SGs, individual SGs, 7 of them, that are working together. But once I think we have that identity of the alliance, rather than just calling it, we have formed an alliance and we're working together. Once we get that where we can use a name like you just did with Knights of the Round Table, then I think it makes it easier as we go to some of these events to do some chants and stuff, not as individual SGs. It's not like Dago Boys doing a Dago Boys chant and maybe some people jumping in. It's actually, a whole bunch of people jumping in to do an alliance chant. And I think until we get that identity, it's going to feel maybe a little awkward or forced sometimes when we do that, because we have those 7 identities that are being pushed out in front to everyone at these events. And once we have that singular identity, I think it'll make it easier to pull people in and start doing things under that alliance name and umbrella, and start claiming these not as Dago Boys songs, but these are songs for the alliance and that we're going to be singing in the North End. And yes, Dago Boys contributed it and brought it to the group, but we're singing these things as a group, just like Chavos brought a bunch of songs and stuff for us in 109 that we all embraced and sang. Right. So the same kind of idea. Once we and again, when we were at loyal matches, what evolved over time is it wasn't, when we wanted to talk about everyone, we spoke about 109. Right? There was an identity that kind of encompassed everybody who is in that section. We don't have that quite yet. And once we have that, I think it'll make that intermingling a lot, I won't say easier, but more natural to happen.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I know that there is some, I've heard rumblings, I was speaking to, won't name anybody, but, people who make their livings maybe reporting on sports and media. There's an idea. First of all, there was a little bit of surprise from some folks that I had conversations with that there was not a name yet. A little bit of surprise and like looking at their watch and being like, I mean, it's, May. And I think that sense of urgency is probably being heightened, right? The frog in the pot, so to speak, because of that timeline. But yeah, so from the outside looking in, there's definitely a lot of head scratching about like, what are these folks doing, right? Like, it's May, and not having a name is one of the things that I was kind of told was one of the things that people were like, okay, good luck. Like, so you are on the Alliance Council, you are privy to conversations the rest of us are not privy to. Is there like, I mean, I think there's a meeting coming up. Like, are we close to voting on a name? Are we, has the club given us a deadline to pick a name? Because I know that the club wants us to have a name like yesterday.
I think there's a lot of people who would like to have a name or identity, yesterday or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, because certainly in some ways that makes it easier to talk about us instead of the alliance, instead of rattling off all 7 SGs. So sure. And let's see, try to go through all the things. So let's go from the club. Has the club like given us a deadline? I would say no. The club hasn't given us a deadline
yet.
Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe there will be a deadline at some point. The club hasn't given us a deadline, but we are having conversations, I would say, without trying to get too much into the weeds of all the talk, but there are some conversations back and forth, and also looking at particular time frames that would be beneficial to both groups. in terms of an announcement for a name. So those are also internal conversations that are happening, and trying to figure out, what would be best, and do any of these dates work well in terms of the alliance and the other work that we have to do, because it all ties in together, and you have to figure out at different times what you need to prioritize, because you have the getting the governing structure and everything put together for the alliance, and whatever the incorporation process is going to be for that. You have the name, right? And then you have other things that the club may impose. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but in the way the club wants to deal and interact with the alliance versus individual supporter groups. So making sure we understand all those parameters as we're having those conversations, so we can clearly identify our order of operations. What do we absolutely need to do first? What can we do in parallel, and what maybe that we push off a little bit so we can focus our time and energy.
Now,
And I
John, that
would
sounds like an
say,
awful lot like work.
yeah, well, it is a lot like work.
I thought this was supposed to be
And
fun. What's going on here?
well, the work is so that we can do all the fun in the long run,
I
right?
don't like
Because
it.
there has to
I
be
don't
some
like it.
work done in the background. Um, but that's, I think it would be fair to say at our May 15th meeting, there will be a lot of these conversations, and really trying to lay out, um, the process of how we're doing things, because we have communication channels, we are making decisions between our bigger meetings, but some things you really just need everybody in the same room and talk face to face to really, settle through
Sure.
some things, so you can
So is
make
that
those
kind
kind of
of
bigger leaps forward.
like, and you can, I know you don't have to talk like officially like the locals. Like, to me, the hierarchy, you figure out what your name is, and then maybe you figure out like, okay, are we an umbrella, a union group? Are we an alliance? Like, you figure out that, and then you figure out like, okay, are we going to incorporate this way? Are we going to set up the structure this way? And then like you kind of go down the line like that, right? Is that kind of what you're looking at?
I would say kind of. I mean, I think the first things we needed to do was figure out, well, I mean, we've already done some of these steps, but one, do we agree to work together, right? We had to kind of figure out what that framework was to agree to move forward, so we could even have those other conversations.
Anybody watching the stream, did you see that thumb just show up on John's
Oh, did I
screen?
did I do one of
You
those?
did a thumbs up. And I don't
Yeah,
know if that is just me on StreamYard seeing it, or
no,
if the
it's an
entire
Apple
audience
device
was
things.
just treated to an animated thumbs up on your screen. It's incredibly distracting. You were
I will
saying
try not
something.
to gesticulate
You were
as
saying
much
something
here.
important, I'm sure. What was that?
One of the first steps we had to do is agree to work together. And then one of the second steps we really needed to do is figure out, how do we make interim decisions before we really have bylaws and governing structure and everything else? Because you have to have some way to move forward as you're having these conversations, and to put things to the group and agree on some things, so that, okay, you're chipping away a little by little as you're getting there. And I would, say, of the things you mentioned in terms of name and governance and incorporation, a lot of those things can be worked on in parallel as well. Like, they don't have to be one before the other. But I think also looking
Well, certain
at,
things can't happen until you do the other thing, right? Like,
well, we can't officially incorporate an alliance, as an entity, at least under state of California rules. I mean, you have to have a name, right? At some point before you file formal paperwork, you need to have a name. Um, so yes, at some point you need to do that, but before you file your articles of incorporation, everything, you need to figure out your governing structure and your bylaws. And so all those conversations can be happening in parallel to hopefully all coincide roughly at the same point, so you can pull everything together.
mm,
And I think that would be fair to say that some of those conversations will be happening at our May 15th meeting to try to figure out timelines, order of importance, like if we need to focus or do we, and not just that, but also, okay, if there's a month between our meetings, how do we want to tackle certain milestones, like set up things like, okay, by this Tuesday, whatever the date is, we're going to do it, and how will we vote online? And we want to make sure everybody's on the same page and working under the same parameters. So hopefully we don't have the hiccups down the road, that we can move efficiently towards actually getting to the point where we want to have that identity of a group for that section that will help us manage game days, match days, and what the section's going to look like, and ticket distributions, and all the things that come up when you're, once you're a supporter group, once you're actively in there, in order for us to do the fun stuff, right? How do we get all the groundwork put in there so that we can put that together?
So what is the saying, the thing about you mentioned, like we had talked about union versus alliance, like, can you just, for the sake of, well, for my education, and the audience as well may not be totally clear about what we're even talking about here. So let me just kind of put it to you this way. Like, my understanding is you have different ways you could organize a supporter section, and different
Right.
different teams, fans have organized in a number of different ways. And I believe there are at least two kind of fundamental options here, and then variations under those. But one is kind of this umbrella group that we would call a union, that kind of all of the SGs are kind of under this union umbrella, versus this alliance, which is a less centralized type of governing structure, but still functions to kind of speak as one voice and dealing with the club. Is that basically it? Like, basically, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I would say in a nutshell, I mean, the terms alliance and union, they're used, I would say, somewhat interchangeably around the landscape. You look at one union structure for one team, it's going to be a little different than another union structure. Um, but I would say if we use the name maybe union and alliance for our conversations, and then kind of talk about the edges of the conversation, so on the one hand, you have the philosophy that if you were going to incorporate as an alliance, that it is the governing group. Like, all the members would vote of every SG. They would all be together. They would vote. They would pick a president. They would pick, um, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, and so forth. And it would, the membership would vote. There would be bylaws, and that would kind of be the structure of how it would run. And then, like, that's the extreme end on one side, and there really isn't necessarily individual SG um, inputs the same way, right? That would be one. If you think of at least the way we've been talking about it, more of an alliance structure is more shared. It's really more governance than how you might be incorporated. It's more of a shared governing structure. Each SG has representation on a board, and that board does the voting and the structure. And I would say that's kind of the framework we've been working through in terms of governance, like just how we're going to make some decisions. But within that, there's an organizational structure. Like, how are you going to handle match day operations? Are you going to have a drummers union? Are you going to have a capos union? Like, what is kind of your hierarchy of managing day-to-day stuff, which to me would be different than your board that does the voting, right? That actually makes the decisions. And then you have all kinds of combinations in between there, right? So it's not a black or white issue. It's not one or the other, or it has to be, if we say a union, it has to be governed a certain way, or even if we say an alliance, it has to be governed or structured a certain way. But these are the conversations. How do we incorporate? How do we govern? How do we handle memberships across? How do we make sure everybody is legally allowed to operate, in the state of California? Because we are moving into a different arena. Whereas in lower league soccer, you can be a little more flexible, with how things are organized and what you do with low attendance numbers. Moving into this bigger stage with a bigger spotlight comes also with some other um, guardrails and restrictions, for lack of a better word. Like if you want to partner and be recognized and be in the space, you're going to have to be incorporated in some way. So um,
You know, like
those are
legally
things,
incorporated, some kind of a nonprofit, like with some
right?
governance structure, some financial due diligence, and like filing your taxes
Exactly.
and doing all of that kind of thing, right? Like you have to
Right.
be legal. So the assumption is that maybe under one structure, all seven groups would have to like be, legal entities in the state of California.
Well, I mean, we can take at least how they were organized at one time. I'm not an expert on Charlotte, but their supporter group, the way they had structured, at least the stuff that I had seen, is each of their individual supporter groups had to be legally and properly structured in the state as some kind of either a nonprofit or an LLC or something. They had to be organized in some way as a legal entity. And then their alliance that they have, to the best of my knowledge, is not structured in any way as a legal entity because all the other groups are. But then
Hmm.
you take different groups, which, and again, I am not 100% sure, so somebody feel free to correct me, but I believe if we take like our neighbors up north, the 3252 are organized more as a union where that is the legal entity structure and everybody kind of forms and organizes under that. So that handles all your legal and fiscal responsibilities. But they also do kind of more of that extreme end, from my understanding, of vote for a president and a vice president and all those positions across the members.
Okay. So
You
that
know,
would kind of, I mean, not that I'm picking a favorite or anything, but it sounds like for maybe a group that is newly formed, maybe smaller, membership wise, even leadership wise, that doesn't have maybe the capacity to, you know, do all of that kind of paperwork, right? Like maybe for a group like that, I can see the appeal of that structure where there's only one, entity that is, a legally recognized entity. And that is where all the, just a handful of people are, selected or whatever, however they get there. Everything's done under that entity. And then, the SGs maybe organize under something in those bylaws and structures that allow them to exist as independent in whatever way they want to be, right?
right. And I think that's, the question that people have, like, what does independence mean to a particular person? Having, if we use the name union as that bigger structure, it does allow that bigger group to handle the legal and fiscal protections, and it kind of frees up the individual SGs. Let me rephrase this. One way of viewing it is it frees up the individual SGs to have a little more freedom to be able to do things and not have to worry about all the legal and fiscal things because it's being handled at a higher level.
That's me, man. I don't want to do
And
work. Like, hey, oh yeah,
an
man.
alternate view,
Y'all
right?
do the
An
work, bro.
alternate
Like
view,
I'm good here banging on my drum.
but an alternate view for some people would be, okay, but if someone else is controlling my money, right? If you're talking in terms of memberships, then like how do our members and our SG um, how do we do that? Do we collect separate memberships on our own to be part of that and, to do certain things? So some people would view that as losing control, right? Where some people would view it as the freedom to operate and do things a little more freely without having to worry about the fiscal and financial headache. Others would look at that as, well, now we don't have everything entirely within our control. And some people would argue, is that taking away independence? And then, it's there's a lot of flexibility within the space between those two models that we know that our parent group is going to have to be whatever this alliance name becomes, whether we call it a union, whether we call it an alliance, but whatever this eventually becomes, there will be a structure to it that will handle legal and fiscal responsibilities in some way because it has to. And then we got to figure out, okay, well, then how does the governance structure work within that? And also, there's fiscal issues, right? If we're locals and we want to manage our own money from memberships, like how does that work, right? But also, how does it work if shared expenses like TIFOs, right? So you have these conversations that are being had, and how do we structure things in a way that helps people where they might need help and also allows some freedom where some SGs might like a little more freedom and independence with how they operate. That's really
Right.
the challenge.
So
Rather than
for me,
forcing anybody to be in a particular space, how do we set it up that as best we can fulfills the needs of
okay, so like
all the SGs?
if an SG wants to be a legal entity and do all this, they can do that. But if you're like me and you have, like, I have a 5-person SG that I just started, I want to be in the union, but like, listen, I don't want to do any fucking paperwork. Like maybe there would be a space for that type of an organization, strategy as well, right? Like maybe we can make
Right.
space for both type of things.
And those are the conversations we need to have. And is that possible? Yes, that's absolutely possible if we decide to do that, that there could be space kind of for some flexible structures for individual SGs. Like the locals, we are already incorporated as something. So those are conversations, and other groups are not. So you could form, then just keep kind of doing what you're doing, but under the umbrella of the alliance, so you have the legal and fiscal protection. Or maybe for other groups who are already incorporated or would like to be incorporated, still in terms of governance be under that, but also have a little more freedom to operate your SG. And
Yeah.
those are the challenging things. Like how do we fit those pieces together? Because you could, if you do the extreme, like each SG is independently on their own, and we just have these bylaws of an unofficial organization about how we agree to work together, to the other side of the union where, all right, there's no SG that really is in the governance part of it. You're in there, you're part of the group, but we're electing a president, we're electing, everybody's just electing someone to fill that gap. Really, it's kind of the difference between the way the locals operated for the first few years and how we're operating now. I mean, the first few years, we operated like a true union. That's how the locals were originally structured, as an independent supporters union, modeled after the 3252. It was supposed to be an umbrella organization that had other SGs. All the SGs were going to form underneath it. But what ended up happening is there was only one supporter group. It was the locals. And the name of the umbrella group was the locals. And it became so intertwined that it was really difficult to separate the union piece from the actual SG. And it didn't, the way it evolved didn't really allow space for other SGs to fit in.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember. So that, and you got to see the chat right now, John. They're just
I
going
don't have it where I can see it. I'm going to have to
absolutely
move it over.
wild. People love the convo about governance structures and fiscal accountability. People are
I know
going
we
nuts
probably
right
turned
now.
everyone off here.
They are loving this right now. We are just on fire here on the Hellas Chrome podcast right now.
We
So I
probably
do
need to
actually.
switch gears.
I'm joking, but I do. If you are part of this audience for this podcast, like, and you are tired of hearing about this, please let me know. Like, I don't want to be. To me, it's super interesting. Just personally, I'm kind of invested mentally in this conversation, and we don't have a whole lot of other topics, to be honest, because we don't have any soccer to talk about. But if this is just killing y'all, let me know, and we will stop devoting so much time every week to this conversation. But I am, a man of the people. I do want to give the folks what they want, and if it's not this, then let me know. Until then, guess what?
You're plugging away.
I'm going for it because I think that this is kind of. I mean, when you just it's easy to get bogged down in details, and it is, it does not sound like a lot of fun, like doing all of this work,
It's a
but
lot of work. Yeah.
it's also really important because the club, this is, MLS is a major league sport. They're setting aside a significant chunk of their revenue, potential revenue, right? These seats, and basically handing it over to a large element of control to this group, right? And there could be, not that we want to be independent, but there could be certain expenditures, donations, etc., discussed in the future. And as a business, the club cannot just give something to a disorganized rando, right? Like, you have to
Right.
have some kind of incorporation. So there definitely has to be a bunch of grown-ups in the room, basically doing the paperwork and getting this stuff done, just so that the club can have like an official relationship with this independent group, uh these 7 independent groups, right? And that's why I think it's so important, because this is laying the foundation and the groundwork for something that is going to continue forward in perpetuity, right? Until MLS folds in on itself and we finally get like a proper
Proper
football
pyramid
federation
structure.
structure. This is what we've got, right? And keeping in mind that the way MLS is structured as an entity, right? It is a single entity type of business. So like our relationship is essentially going to be with MLS. Yes, it's the club, and the club is its own thing, but just it's incredibly. And I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but uh, it is a lot more involved than what we had in Torero Stadium dealing with Loyal. So um, it's super important that we get this right, and that we I think the worst case scenario is we've got a supporter section doing 3 or 4 different chants at a time during a match, and you've got different drummer sections doing totally different drums and beats throughout a match, which is, to me, is like a nightmare scenario. Like, nobody wants that. But if we don't get this right, and kind of future proof it in a way, you can see where things break down, and that's where we end up. So that's why we're spending so much time on it, and why it comes up every week. So I just wanted to get that out there. But speaking of getting out there will be more opportunities to meet, mingle, and get together with your fellow supporters. John, what's next on the calendar as far as events go?
I believe the next one is the Chrome Ball Tour event in Vista, which should be Memorial Day weekend. I do not know if it's supposed to be Saturday or Sunday. I've seen some conflicting dates. I'm not sure if a full schedule has been sent out by the club yet. But look for that, like another one coming up at the end of this month. So we'll get the details, and then there will be several over the summer. And as I said, we're gonna have a busy summer coming up of soccer, so I cannot imagine that the club will pass up on opportunities to do things around Copa America or
Well,
the
I mean, you
Euros
want
or
to talk
things like
about
that.
America? Memorial Day weekend is the Club America Cup. This is
Oh, that's
replacing
right.
this is
Yes.
replacing the Man City Cup, which was the big Memorial Day youth soccer tournament in San Diego. This is at the I think it's going to be at all the surf fields in Del Mar, probably up in Oceanside as well.
Oceanside and Temecula as well,
So
the
this
Galway
is
Downs.
very exciting. My my kid will be among the teams participating. He'll be playing in that, so Chrome Ball might be a little difficult up in Vista. But hey, I think we may be in the
Oh,
ocean.
you're close.
We may be playing in Oceanside, so might be able to pop on over depending on the game schedule and all that. But that's another part of the conversations we had at on Saturday was, you know, this is an area where I don't think the club has quite gotten their strategy or their operations around is that youth soccer world in San Diego, which I mean a lot of kids grew up here playing soccer. Obviously, my kid is doing that right now, and these all of these soccer facilities are just jam packed with families almost every weekend, year round. And I think Wave has done really well in reaching out to clubs. You know, from the moment they started, we get emails and invites for tickets and team nights at Wave matches. Um, haven't seen the same amount of outreach from SDFC yet. Of course, there are no games, so that might be part of it. But I do see, club teams are entering. There are kids from these club teams that are coming to Chrome Ball and
Right.
participating in the tournaments. Right, you'll see the Surf Shirts and the Chula Vista Football Club and the different youth clubs are participating in the events. I don't know if that's the clubs and the coaches entering their teams, or that's just the kids getting together and wanting to do it, or the parents or whatever. Um, so there is that part of it. I think there's probably a lot more to come on that front because, I mean, the Wave figured it out. Like, there's a huge audience there, right? People who will come to your games uh, if
Right.
get those lines of communication open. Not that MLS is going to have a problem drawing folks to their matches. You know, the Wave led the NWSL in attendance, so they don't have this. They don't have that problem either. But that's a big part of when we look at the club and them coming here is that academy, the right to dream, and then all of the youth elements have yet to kind of solidify, and I think that's probably, I don't know. Once again, I am talking from a position of ignorance, but I would imagine that that's one of alley, the roads to come is that element.
I would say if you haven't seen that yet, you are likely to see a lot more stuff coming in the future. I know they have some coaching initiatives working with all the coaches in the area. Um, there's other things that I'm sure
Let me
that
tell you, they need
many
it.
they they
Yeah, not everybody out there has that A license. I'm just, they need it.
yeah they I I'm sure they keep. I think every time we have a monthly meeting with the front office, they're sharing new people that they've hired to help in certain areas. So if you, as a dad of a soccer player on a club team, haven't seen it yet, I would expect you will be seeing it pretty soon
Oh, I mean,
for
they're
those
already
things.
asking about signing, and they're already looking at. No, that's
No, but I mean,
not
just
my kid.
even like the wave of reaching out and attending matches and doing those things. But like you said, we don't have a team yet. The games don't start till next February, so um, I'm sure once the fall season starts to roll around, I
Yeah.
think everything really is going to ramp up a lot more as the 2024 MLS season starts to wind down. Then the 2025 season is really, especially for us, on the horizon. Like
Sure.
this is one huge off season for us since we have the announcement and moving forward to where we actually get a home match. There's just going to be a lot of buildup and anticipation. And as you know, as that 2024 season ends, like that's really our time to really start moving forward because now we're officially part of everything else, in terms of league and teams, and we'll start seeing, you know, San Diego FC in the other MLS conversations because you don't see it right now when you look at the website and other places because we're not really officially part of the league yet till the season ends. So I think once all that happens and we are then setting up for 2025, then the hype train will really kick into full gear for those 3 months ish of the off
Yeah.
season.
Yeah. All right. Well, so Memorial Day weekend, the next Chrome Ball. Anything folks should be cognizant of or looking out for between now and our next live stream in a week?
If you haven't had a chance to watch the Rocket League team play, check it out. Follow Discord. Check the random channel for when the things get posted because it's usually day of.
I think
they're a
they
lot of
even keep
fun,
the streams up. If you want to watch today's
go watch the one
match
against
was
El
a sweep,
Matador.
but last week it was.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
it was so stressful. It was a great match that they pulled out in that last game. I mean, it was unbelievable. Really thrilling win there.
And just a shout out to our Mira Mesa kickball team, who I believe have a semifinal match this Thursday. And they are hoping to make it to the championship match. I didn't get an update for the North Park team, so I don't know how they're doing. But they were top of the table the last we checked in with them, and I don't know when their season ends. But the Mira Mesa team will be in the semifinals this week on Thursday.
All right. Well, until then, it was great to see everybody on Saturday. I hope to see y'all at the next event. If you haven't made it out yet, please come out, see some familiar faces, say hi to everybody. It was great seeing, I saw a lot of folks I haven't seen in a long time Saturday. It was great. Come out, get to know your fellow supporters, and yeah, we're ramping up. Check Discord for further updates. We are also trying to be more active in the Facebook group, so check there. We are trying to keep it updated as well. I actually posted in there today my first post on Facebook since my last one, which was like a month ago. So both of them in the locals community group. So there you go. We are active. So check back there. Get involved. Reach out if you got feedback on the show. If you have thoughts on the content of the show, or if you have thoughts on this alliance/union, I personally am interested in hearing those thoughts and your perspectives. So bring it up. Let's have these conversations. And yeah, we are really getting going here. Like, this is the unofficial start of summer. This event on the 4th, Memorial Day. From then on, it's going to be pedal to the metal, and things are going to happen fast. So we need help. If you want to get involved, reach out, talk to us, join the Discord. There's more than 200 members of the locals right now. Where are y'all? Get on Discord, get involved. Let's hear from y'all. Let's make this thing happen. So until next week, thanks so much.
All right. Good night, everyone.
All right.